You are listening to the Disney Dream Girls, an unofficial Disney Theme Parks podcast, and this is show number 348 for Sunday the 24th of January 2021.
Where dreams begin.
Hello and welcome to this week's Disney Dream Girls. My name is Michelle Young, and together with my jolly good chum Jane Phipps, we are your guides to the place where dreams begin. This week's show, we have an extra special guest. We are joined by the prolific Disney historian and author, Jim Korkis. Before we start the interview that we had with Jim, if you want to hear it in its entirety, why not pop on over to patreon.com/Disney Dream Girls and consider supporting us for a small amount each month in return to get exclusive content, extra podcasts and lots more. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter @DisDreamGirls. You can also find us on Facebook with our Disney Dream Girls podcast family. Answer a few questions and then share your Disney daily life with us. So as we said in our introduction at the beginning of the show, we are incredibly blessed to have the wonderful Jim Korkis joining us today. As you know from past shows, he is our very dear friend and fantastic author, prolific author of Disney history books. So let's just welcome him to the show. Hello, Jim.
Well, thank you so much, and I do consider myself a dear friend of this show and of the listeners. You know, it's always an honor, and I'm always excited to be on the show because I get to share stories with those people who are passionate about all things Disney and constantly want to know more. Again, Disney itself is a storytelling company, whether it's the films or the parks or animation or any other entertainment form that they produce. It's all about stories. And of course, personally, my favorite stories are about Walt Disney. And you would think that everything by now, you know, has been written about Walt Disney. And I find that is absolutely not true, that the more you keep looking, the more you keep uncovering. It's like an onion with different layers that you keep peeling off and you peel off and you peel off. And there's always something new and always something that can relate to what the world is like today.
Absolutely. What have you been working on most recently, Jim?
I just sent in the manuscript for my latest book, which will be coming out in the spring. It's called Kungaloosh, The Mythic Jungles of Walt Disney World. And half of the book is devoted to the Adventurers Club that used to be at Pleasure Island. And I did interviews with the Imagineers who created the club and wrote the music and all sorts of stories that list all of the characters and all of the different shows that were done in there. So even people who never got a chance to attend the Adventurers Club will get a sense of why those people who did fell in love with it. But of course, that would be a very limited audience for the book. So the other half of the book is devoted to all the different jungles at Walt Disney World. So there's a chapter on Walt Disney World's version of the Jungle Cruise, you know, with all the differences between that and the one in Disneyland, all the changes that the one in Walt Disney World went through. There's a chapter where I interview the Imagineer who created the Trader Sam's Tiki Bars at the Disneyland Hotel, and also the one that's over at the Polynesian here at Walt Disney World. And he talks about how he went about creating that and the choices that he made and the differences between the two bars that were very specific. A whole chapter on the Skipper Canteen restaurant a chapter on all the attractions in Walt Disney World's Adventureland that's no longer there, including the Shrunken Ned boats, which were miniature Jungle Cruise launches that were radio controlled. So you had a steering wheel and you put in 2 tokens and you piloted this little miniature Jungle Cruise launched through a volcano and headhunters and tiki gods and all of that. And of course, there are chapters devoted to Animal Kingdom, including 2 chapters that feature exclusive, never-before-printed interviews with Joe Rohde that I did. In fact, one of them is about the entire philosophy behind Disney Animal Kingdom, but the other is about the Yeti and Expedition Everest and things that we may not pay attention to, but they're there, so now's a chance to go look at them. And a chapter on the different Indiana Jones jungles at Walt Disney World and the Pandora jungle, the different flora and fauna that are in that little land of Avatar, and how those got created, including some comments from the UC Riverside professor of botany who James Cameron brought in to make sure that even though these are fanciful creations, plants and all, they're based in reality and the reality of what it would be like on that planet. So as you can hear, I'm just very, very excited about it, and I hope you'll ask me back on when it comes out in the spring. And yes, that is how I spend my time. Is I write. I write a monthly column for allears.net. In fact, in 2 weeks they'll be publishing a column by me about President Ronald Reagan's second inaugurational parade. And the reason I write about it is it was held at Epcot, out in front of the American Adventure, because Ronald Reagan's second inauguration was so cold that they couldn't have the parade. They couldn't have the bands and all that. So Michael Eisner, who was there attending the inauguration, invited Reagan to come to Walt Disney World anytime he wanted and have the inauguration parade there. So he did.
How cool is that? That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. It has never been done before, never has been done since. But yes, Walt Disney World actually hosted the presidential inauguration parade. And so I go through all of the challenges that were faced by that, because the Secret Service got really upset because Walt Disney World was promoting it. Come see the inauguration. And they're going, oh my gosh, how are we going to, vet and handle security for all of these people from around the world who are coming here, and how are we going to protect, the president? There's a lot of places that I write for, and thank heavens I love writing, or this would be a huge punishment. And I love telling stories, and I also feel, oh my gosh, we've got to get those stories out there because they're just gone. People are forgetting them. I was called recently from several newspapers that go, can you tell us the history of annual pass holders, and when did that get started, and why did that get started? And Disney has stopped this now, but what's going on with that? And I thought, Disney must have this information, don't they, about annual pass holders and why that got started and how it ended up at Walt Disney World. And I guess Disney is just so busy doing things that they often don't have the time to record it, to document it, because as soon as one thing is finished, they're already on to something else, and they're already late getting on to that next thing. So thank heavens for this podcast, and thank heavens for your listeners who will be getting this information and then sharing it with others, so that the stories live on, and the Disney history and the Disney legacy lives on.
Absolutely. We're very lucky to have you, Jim, you see, to get all this knowledge and information out there, because I've already wrote down about Ronald Reagan because I didn't know about that. So I'm going to be spreading that news wide. I can tell you now, that's a really interesting, cool fact.
Well, thank you. You know, one of the greatest compliments I got on one of my books is somebody wrote to me and said, "What I like about your books is I always feel so much smarter after I've read them."
I'm going to take that one away as well, yeah.
and I thought, you know, that's great, because so much these days is just sort of fluff, or there's really no detail. One of the keys to Disney difference is the attention to detail, and all the little details there that, you know, put it into the context and make it real.
Definitely.
All sounds good. But we've got you on today because you've got a very exciting topic to talk about, something that Jane and I weren't even particularly aware about. So we're just going to sit back, enjoy our cup of coffee, and just let you go, Jim, because that is what you do best.
I also hope you have some scones or some crumpets or something like that, so that I can be insanely jealous. But yes, you know, one of the things that's on most of our minds now is this pandemic, and as I told you, I feel like I'm sort of under house arrest. You know, Walt Disney, when he was 16 years old, he almost died in a pandemic. He got the H1N1 influenza virus in 1918, what we call the Spanish flu. And it infected, between March of 1918 and around summer of 1919, it infected over 500 million people worldwide, and that flu was responsible for killing at least 50 million people, and maybe as many as 100 million people. And it took them, believe it or not, 90 years to find out what something that would, you know, vaccinate against that. But by gosh, you know, this was just horrendous. Now we come to a 16-year-old Walt Disney. And so during World War I, Walt drew a lot of patriotic cartoons for his high school newspaper. And those drawings, of course, displayed, you know, his passionate support for the troops, and included helpful suggestions like buying savings stamps or eating less or more, so more food could be sent overseas to the troops. So again, a 16-year-old who doesn't have a lot of life experience, doesn't have a lot of perspective, but is still thinking, you know, what can we do? You know, what can a normal, average person do, you know, to help, you know, in this effort? You know, his older brother, Roy, joined the Navy in 1917 and was assigned to the Great Lakes Naval Training Station, which was outside of Chicago, which, again, Roy and Walt and the Disney family living in Chicago, Illinois. Roy was eventually transferred to South Carolina, where he was assigned to transporting material on ships between New York and France. And perhaps I should be a little clearer on that. It wasn't just material. This was ammunition. And this was very sensitive ammunition, so at any moment it could explode. Or if it was caught at sea by enemy ships that fired on the ship, the ship would explode, and Roy with it. And in fact, Roy never talked about his experiences during World War I, not even to his son. I talked with his son, and I said, well, what did your dad think about the war and all? He said he would never talk about it. He never talked about it to the family. He never talked about what he went through and all of that. Well, anyway, Walt went to visit his brother, and boy, he was impressed with Roy in his uniform, and Walt was eager to, you know, join as well. And in fact, Walt was tall for his age, and you know, could carry himself with maturity. And so he was mistaken for a new recruit and was almost shipped off with Roy, who had to step in and intervene and say, no, look, this is my 16-year-old younger brother here. And Walt's other two older brothers, Ray and Herbert, they served in the Army. And so Walt was just all stirred up. It's like, I've got to get over there, you know. I don't want to be a slacker, because Walt was seeing people who were, you know, faking illnesses and faking injuries and all that, so they didn't have to be in one branch of the military or the other. And Walt was working part-time at a post office, delivering letters. That's a whole nother story, and lots of fun stories about that. But he had another 16-year-old friend, Russell Moss, who found out that the Canadian Army would accept young volunteers. Russell and Walt planned to sneak out and cross the Canadian border and sign up for the Canadian Army just so they could be in the war. And they had it all planned out. They were going to join up as the St. John brothers and all of this. But Russell's mother found his packed suitcase and called Walt's mother, and she found Walt's packed suitcase, and they stopped their sons from running away. But Russell also found out that the American Ambulance Corps, and at the time that was part of the Red Cross, would accept volunteers as young as 17. Walt liked to joke that the Red Cross would take those that were too young, too old, or too incapacitated for the military, because those were the only ones left to take. And so Walt and Russell were going to lie about their age to do that. And here's a piece of exclusive trivia just for your listeners, and this is one of the reasons you should keep listening to this podcast all the time, because you never know when you're going to find these little trivia treasures. Clara Bart was a nurse. She was the founder of the American Red Cross. She was Walt Disney's sixth cousin once removed. So you never know. You know, we often talk about, 60 degrees of separation when it comes to actor Kevin Bacon, that so many people are interconnected and all of that. You could say the same thing about Walt Disney. There were so many connections, to Walt Disney and his family there. Again, his family found out that he was going to sign up, for the American Ambulance Corps, because he had to get a parental permission. He had to get them to sign a slip that said, yes, even though he's not an adult, it's okay, with the parents. Mm-hmm. Walt's father, Elias, didn't want him to go, tried everything to talk him out of it, all that. And finally, Walt says, look, I don't want my grandchildren asking me, why weren't you in the war? Were you a slacker? Walt was patriotic for his entire life. He supported the U.S. Troops, 100%. And we see that later in World War II, where he's actually donating Disney artwork and artists and all of that for training films and for posters and all of that, just at cost, making no profit whatsoever. One of Walt's very first artistic endeavors, because his father finally said, okay, go if you want to go, but I'm not going to sign that paper. But his mother did, because she could see that if she didn't, he'd find some other way of doing this. This way they could at least, try and keep track of him. Walt took a black pen, and on his passport application that was filled out by his mother, he changed, and it had already been notarized, he changed his birth year from 1901 to 1900, so that his age now appeared to be 17 rather than 16. Fortunately, the Disney Archives has that famous document.
Wow.
And once you look at it closely, the forgery is so obvious. It's like, a neon light flashing at you. But again, I guess people just didn't pay attention, and oh well, yeah, this is signed by his mother, and this is notarized. Okay, we're going to go with this. So Walt enlisted on September 16th, 1918, and again, this is the ambulance corps, and so, but they received uniforms. Both Russell and he received uniforms. They reported to Camp Scott, which was a temporary encampment at, believe it or not, a burned-out amusement park and roller rink near the University of Chicago. So Walt is training to go overseas at an amusement park. And so mechanics from the Yellow Cab Company taught them how to repair motors, assemble and disassemble cars, drive vehicles over rough terrain, because, again, it was a burnt-out amusement park, so it's uneven. There's all sorts of things in the way that you've got to maneuver around, whatever. And they did that for 2 weeks, and then the two boys got what's called basic training, military training, how to handle the rifle and the marching and the crawling through the mud. There was another 16-year-old boy with them who had lied about his age to be part of that. Are you guys ready for a surprise, another surprise connection to Walt Disney?
You're spoiling us with all these surprises today. Go on then, lovely.
Okay. The other 16-year-old boy was Ray Kroc, who created the McDonald's franchise. And here is a quote from his autobiography, Grinding It Out, The Making of McDonald's. It says, as school ended that spring, the United States entered World War I. I took a job selling coffee beans and novelties door to door. I was confident I could make my way in the world and saw no reason to return to school. Besides, the war effort was more important. Everybody was singing Over There, and that's where I wanted to be. My parents objected strenuously, but I finally talked them into letting me join up as a Red Cross ambulance driver. I had to lie about my age, of course, but even my grandmother could accept that. In my company, which assembled in Connecticut for training, was another fellow who had lied about his age to get in. He was regarded as a strange duck because whenever we had time off and went out on the town to chase girls, he stayed in camp drawing pictures. His name was Walt Disney.
Wow.
Okay, now it doesn't end there. I wouldn't come on this program if I couldn't plus it, add something else. Decades later, in 1954, Walt received a letter from Kroc. Okay, 1954, Walt's in the process of building Disneyland, right? Mm-hmm. The Disney Archives has a copy of the letter and Walt's response. Ray Kroc wrote, "Dear Walt, I felt somewhat presumptuous addressing you in this way, yet I feel you would not want me to address you any other way. My name is Ray A. Kroc. I look over the Company A picture we had taken at South Beach, Connecticut," and he enclosed a picture, that picture, many times and recall a lot of pleasant memories. I have very recently taken over the national franchise of the McDonald's system. I would like to inquire if there may be an opportunity for McDonald's in your Disneyland development. And Walt responded with a warm letter informing Kroc that his request had been sent to the vice president in charge of Disneyland concessions, that was C.V. Wood, because Walt was currently confining his activities to the creative side, as they were racing to complete the theme park on time. Now, C.V. Wood, of course, was a crook. He was in charge of concessions, but he only gave concessions to people who would give him a kickback. That's one of the reasons that when Walt found out about it, he fired Wood. But Kroc never received a response, and he went on to open his first McDonald's franchise in June 1955, mere weeks before the opening of Disneyland. So there could have been one of the first McDonald's ever in Disneyland when it opened in July 1955, because Ray Kroc had been training with Walt for the ambulance corps. And Kroc mentions Connecticut, but I said that Walt was being trained in Chicago. So how did Walt get from Chicago to Connecticut? Well, the Spanish influenza epidemic struck Chicago. And Walt became so sick, he was released to go home so his parents could take care of him. In fact, two of Walt's friends, also in the same unit, went to the hospital and they died the next day, simply because hospitals were being overwhelmed. There weren't enough staff. They didn't know how to handle the flu. So the ambulance drivers carried Walt up to his home on a stretcher to his frightened mother and father. My gosh, they're going to lose their youngest son. And to make it worse, Walt's younger sister Ruth had seen her favorite school teacher die of the flu. The Disneys had had several friends and neighbors who had died as well because of the flu. And now here comes their son, and he's sick, and it's like being told you have cancer. You know, your first thought is, this is a death sentence. This is it. And Walt's mother, Flora, nursed her son through the days of high fever and delirium, giving him poultices and heavy doses of quinine. And because his bedroom had no heat, we tend to forget how poor the Disney family was. They were not well off at all. So he had to occupy his parents' room. And when his little sister Ruth became ill as well, her bed was placed beside the kitchen stove, you know, to try to keep her warm because, you know, they had the chills and all this. Flora, because she was nursing her two children, she caught influenza. But the happy ending, I'm going to spoil the happy ending for you. The fevers broke and all three recovered. And so by the time Walt reported back to his unit, the war had ended, but they still needed drivers sent overseas to help with evacuating the troops. So Walt was sent off to France roughly 7 days after the armistice was declared, November 11th, 1918. And here is a special, exclusive treat for your listeners to show you how much I love you. And here's the story in Walt's own words. I was very fortunate, have been very fortunate to meet so many people who knew and worked with Walt, and they were so generous with their time and their stories. One of the people who I just love and felt left us way too soon was his daughter, Diane Disney Miller. And it was very important to her that the legacy of her father be kept alive. Not the myth of her father, but the legacy of her father as a human being, as a son, as a brother, as a father, as a grandfather. She talked in the 50s with her dad and recorded information because she wanted to know. You know, it wasn't like her dad was sitting around telling all of these stories, even though he loved stories. So, you know, what was it like when you were young, Dad? What was it like when you were a kid? So she gave me a lot of that material. And here, for this podcast, in Walt's own words, here is an excerpt from one of those interviews where he talks about getting sick and surviving the pandemic. I wish I could talk like Walt, but you're just going to have to put up with me. Realize that I have a great deal of respect for that man, and what a wonderful storyteller he was. And so here it is. This is what he told Diane. We were too young, I suppose, but they put us through this training. It was at an amusement park that had burned down. It had a lot of basements and cellars, and they put us in the trucks and stuck us in these holes, and we had to get out of the holes. If you couldn't, you were washed up. So while we epidemic, and I got it. They were hauling them out of there, sending them to the hospital. They were dying like flies. So they came over to get me. I was in a tent, and these fellows with the ambulance came over, and one guy said to me, "Kid, do you live in Chicago?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Can we take you home? You got a better chance at home. If we take you to the hospital, you may never come out." And I said, "Yes, you can take me home." And I told them where I lived. So up in front of my house one Sunday, a Sunday morning, drives up this ambulance. He got me out and took me up. My folks put me to bed. My mother got a local doctor, and he did it all with quinine. And I was delirious for about a week. So the company I was scheduled to go with went off without me, and then I was put in another company that I got well when I got well, and they sent me to South Beach, Connecticut. And we were being indoctrinated to go overseas, and the armistice had just been signed, but they still needed 50 guys to go to France. And when they called out number 50, it was Private Walter E. Disney. An hour later, we're on a train and we're on our way, but before the night fell, we were on a boat at Hoboken, That next morning, we were out at sea and on our way to France. It was an old cattle boat loaded with ammunition. So Walt, when he got over there to France, he was billeted at a chateau in St. Cyr, and it was so dank and chilly, he had to wrap himself in newspapers before going to sleep to try and keep warm. And the food was primarily uncooked cans of pork and beans. And then he was transferred to an evacuation hospital in Paris, and he was assigned to the motor pool, and he spent his spare time, and this is how he made a little extra money, drawing posters and cartoons for soldiers and caricatures of them on letters that they were sending home to their friends and family, and painting cartoons on jackets. And he spent most of his time chauffeuring around Army officers and special dignitaries, including General Pershing's 10-year-old son. And he gained a great reputation as a top tour guide. So everybody wanted Walt as their driver and give them a tour. He also served at a Red Cross canteen in France, where his duties were to drive Red Cross canteen workers to various base hospitals to deliver donuts and ice cream, to the patients there. He created a cartoon character of a doughboy that he drew on the canvas sides of the ambulances. But this is the story that I really love, and he did tell this to Diane. I'm just going to summarize it. Is to earn extra money, he teamed up with another young soldier who had created this sideline of selling souvenirs to homebound soldiers. The war was over, so a lot of people were going home, but they wanted to take a souvenir with them. So this young man would get German helmets and shoot them with a bullet hole. And it was Walt's job to transform them into very rare German sniper helmets by making them look battle-scarred with quick-drying shellac and some paint, and banging them up and attaching hair and dried blood to the bullet hole. And so then the two boys would go to the trains, taking the soldiers away, and they'd pay premium price for, my gosh, this is an authentic German sniper helmet. Walt sent all of that money home to his mother and said, hang on to this for me, because who could ever make a living selling souvenirs, And this is, so everything in Walt's life seems to connect. And he always spoke positively of his time in France. He told Diane, and this is a direct quote, he said, "The things I did during those 11 months I was overseas added up to a lifetime of experience. It was such a valuable experience that I feel that if we have to send our boys into the Army, we should send them even younger than we do. I know being on my own at an early age has made me more self-reliant. So here, decades after Walt has passed away, he's still teaching us. He's still teaching us, what to do and how to do it. I really thank you for giving me the opportunity where I could share this story today, because again, there's a lot of great biographies of Walt out there. Again, one of my favorites is Walt Disney, An American Original by Bob Thomas. And one of the reasons I recommend that, of course, is because Bob knew Walt Disney. Bob Thomas was a Associated Press reporter. He knew Walt personally. Walt took him through Disneyland before Disneyland even opened. He put him in a Jeep, and they drove through the funnel of the rivers of the world, the Jungle Cruise. So he's bouncing around in this, and Walt is saying, and over there we'll have gorillas, and over here we'll, and all of this. But Bob Thomas was the only author who was given full access to the Disney studios and everyone who worked there, and was given full access to the Disney family. Thomas said, look, the only way I'll do this is if I can write the truth. I'm not going to write anything fluff. And he was given permission. However, Mrs. Disney, Lillian Disney, who was alive at that time, said, I would prefer it if you withheld these two pieces of information. I can't require you to do that, but I would prefer if you didn't. And again, Bob was very gracious. He did that. But now that since she's passed away, those pieces are now, if you buy a later edition of the book, that information is in there. Do you have any idea what those two pieces of information were?
Oh, I don't know. What about you, Jane?
No idea.
No idea? No clue?
No.
These were the two things Lillian did not want in there. Number one, didn't want it mentioned that Sharon was adopted.
Oh.
Because again, Lillian grew up through that time period where there was this attitude of being adopted. You weren't as good. You weren't, whatever. Mm-hmm. And Walt and Lillian always treated both their daughters equally, and even told Diane. Diane told me this story. She said, yeah, they sat down with me and they said, there are lots of ways of getting a baby. One way is not better than the other. The way we got Sharon is we went to the hospital and got her. The other thing that Lillian wanted left out,
mm-hmm.
She was 2 years older than Walt. So she didn't want it said that she was a cradle robber. And to me, 2 years is nothing, and especially as you get older, it much less of a gap. But everybody just assumed that Lillian was the same age as Walt, or maybe a year or two younger. She was actually a year or two older, yes. And she wanted that left out of the book. And again, if you love these Disney stories, I wrote a book of Walt Disney stories called Call Me Walt. It covers his family, it covers his smoking, it covers his hobbies, it covers his pets. Everybody thought he hated cats. You'll find in the book that no, he loved cats, and sometimes they would curl up on his lap while he was sitting in his chair at home reading a script. So again, wanted to get all of those stories out, and stories that Diane had shared with me, and I have a couple of new books out, Secret Stories of Extinct Walt Disney World, which is over 100 chapters of different things that no longer exist at Walt Disney World. And I also have a book, Hidden Treasures of the Disney Cruise Line, which, again, will not get you a discount reservation, or what's the best cabin to get, or what's the best time of year to sail, whatever, because there's plenty of books and plenty of websites that will deal with that. This is one that goes through the stories of the creation of the cruise line and details to look at on the cruise itself. So there's an entire chapter devoted to, before there was the Disney Cruise Line, Michael Eisner intended to get a 5-story oil tanker and transform it into a Disney theme park that would sail to different ports around the world and would dock there for about 3 or 4 months, so that countries that were too poor or didn't have enough attendance for a Disney theme park could have a Disney theme park for 3 or 4 months, and then it would come back in about 3 years or something like that for that to happen. It also goes through all those items that you see on the ship that you take for granted and it doesn't occur to you. As Michelle pointed out, the Vault of Walt Volume 9, the Halloween edition, all of the Halloween stories associated with Disney, the attractions, the films, all of that. So when people say, "You're writing 4 hours a day every day? What's that all about?" That's how these come out. You have to do that. You can't just sit there and say, "Well, I'm going to take today off and I'll just do twice as many pages tomorrow." It doesn't work that way. And I will tell you that every page I write, sometimes it gets changed tremendously, or sometimes it ends up in a little circular file by my desk. It just brings me great joy that there are people out there who want to hear these stories. I thank you, too, as well, for giving me this opportunity to share the story today. You know, it's not shared anywhere else. Maybe I should include this in one of my books.
Do you know, Jim, I can just sit and listen to you for hours on end, and I do know when you were talking a little bit about the cruise line element of Disney that you gave a fantastic interview to our good friend Tommy Allison over at the Cruise Dudes podcast. So if anyone wants to find out more, listen to that interview, and then also, of course, buy the book, because, you know, Jim's got to get food on the table. We've got to look after it.
This is my only source of income. I have not been able to give presentations. I have not been able to give tours. I have not been able to go to conventions. I am an orphan. For those of you who want to know where to send dark chocolate, I am an orphan. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. I love Tommy Allison, and I love his website. And that was so much fun giving that interview there. I hope you guys can tell how excited I am about all of this, and you know, I hope that all of you stay safe and sane, that all your Disney dreams come true.
Absolutely. And very quickly before we go, because I have 2 quick questions. The first one,
Sure.
You've actually answered on the show, was from Lise Coate, and she basically asked, can you share your least known Disney facts in Disney history? Well, you've done that on the show already, so we don't need to answer that one.
There's more. And in fact, if you'd like sometime, you can solicit some questions from your listeners, and we could do a show sometime where it's just answering listeners' questions.
Perfect.
Because sometimes I don't know what people are really interested in. And oftentimes I usually get... unfortunately, from school children writing a report, questions like, did Walt Disney have any family? Where did he live? And it's like, you want to be nice, you want to be helpful, but it's like, there's dozens of places you can find those things. But I'll bet there are things that you can't find or would be difficult to find somewhere else. And I can't promise that I have the answers, because as Dave Smith once told me, he says, Jim, nobody can know everything, especially about Disney. and he was so right. If somebody asked me a question about Hannah Montana, whatever, I would be stumbling. But I do know some things. and so if you have that a question about Walt, or about the parks, or about some animated film or live action film. I'd be more than happy to give it my best shot. So think about that. See if the listeners are interested. And you said you also had a second question.
Do you remember when you came out and joined and met up with us at the Wilderness Lodge?
That was so wonderful. And then standing out there and seeing the fireworks, and believe me, one of the things that endeared me to you was how gracious you were.
Oh.
You were, there's so few people, have that quality. You were joyful, but what stood out for me was how gracious you were. And yes, do I remember that experience? Yes, I do.
Well, at that meal and firework experience, which I put on for my dear friends, obviously at my own expense, Disney fireworks, was our lovely friend, David Maruka. And he's got a question. He's a mad fan of yours. He's got all the books. He's helping keeping you in a style you have been accustomed to.
So what is his question?
He loves listening to you rather than reading your books. Have you ever considered doing them as audio books so he can listen to your voice rather than read?
The short answer is yes, of course. The long answer is tried that with 2 different companies, but they all fell apart before that was released. One of them fell apart because I recorded this. Then he intended, without asking me, to put in sound effects, not background music, but sound effects during the stories I was telling. And I said, I don't want that, and I don't think people listening to me want that. So we parted ways. But yes, I am in the process with another company right now to release a series of stories on audio so they can have them. And of course, I was a public school teacher, and I bring that up because one woman, a delightful woman at a convention event where I was selling and signing books, she said, yes, you should put your voice on on audio, so she said, because I would love to go to sleep at night hearing your voice. and I said, Miss, I was a junior high school teacher. I hate to tell you the number of students who fell asleep listening to my voice.
Oh, bless you.
I was very flattered by that. So there are really nice people out there because when you're a writer, right now I'm in this little room, on the phone, sitting in my chair. I have no idea if anything I've written has made a difference for people, has made an impact, it has given them a smile, So hearing, these little comments always just, I have to be careful, because if you take those good comments, then you have to take the bad comments, and there are people out there who absolutely hate me just because I exist. And so that's one of the reasons I'm not on social media. I get asked that all the time. I said, look, I have trolls out there, and say terrible things about me and terrible things about my books, and they've never met me.
Well, their loss, because we think you're an absolute treasure. We delight in hearing your tales and stories. The fact that you're busily writing away more books for us to enjoy, because for a lot of people who aren't able to get to the theme parks, accessing Disney via books and podcasts and the online world is the only way that they can manage to get some Disney and bring some cheer to their life. So thank you from everybody who has read your books.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michelle, how gracious is she, right? Thank you.
We love you, Jim. We have taken up so much of your valuable writing time today. We want you back at that keyboard to keep on. We want the next book.
Yeah, because I'm getting back to writing another book. You want an exclusive? You've been so gracious. The new book that I am writing, Hidden Treasures of the Walt Disney World Resorts.
Ooh.
So these are the stories behind the resorts, all the details that you should be looking at in each of the resorts. all of the secrets in the resorts. And I've said too much already because I never like to talk about a book until it's written. But yes, as soon as I get off this phone, I'm back at the computer and I'm slogging away at, this is the story behind this resort and why it was built this way and why these things are here and all of that. So, but don't look to that until the end of the year or the beginning of next year.
Well, we will have you back on again when this exciting book, Kungaloosh and the Mythical Jungles of Walt Disney World, is out, and we can maybe help a few more sales for you, my lovely.
I would love that. Thank you so much. And again, as I said, all of you stay safe and sane. As Walt would like to see, there's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow shining at the end of every day, and we're coming closer and closer to it.
Perfect. Well, until next time, lovely, take care of yourself.